Yo, what's shaking, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Jeff Ketchum. That's Anwar Richardson. Do us a solid. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. You don't need to know anything about sponsors or anything like that today, but it would do us, like you'd be doing us a solid, to just push that little button, smash it, subscribe to the channel. Always be around for the compelling football content that we're going to bring you leading up to what has a chance to be one of the most exciting Texas football seasons in some time. I feel like I say that every year, Anwar, and yet it feels more true this year with the players, a lot of whom we're about to talk about. So let me set the stage for everybody. The all Big 12 preseason teams are just around the corner, right? I mean, Big 12 Media Days, when is that? A couple of weeks? Next week. Next week we're getting our first, we'll get the all Big 12 team. And there will be a lot of conversation about the players that Texas has on it, who are the favorites, who's the preseason Big 12 favorite, all that stuff. Well, Phil Steele from Phil Steele's magazine already came out with his preseason All-Big 12, and it's fascinating to see the national perception of the best players on this Texas program. So, Anwar, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start with the first team players that Phil Steele listed. I just want your immediate reaction, okay?
Okay, let's do it.
Bijan Robinson, Xavier Worthy, and DeMarvion Overshown. There were three that made first team all Big 12, whereas Baylor has 6. Oklahoma has 4. Texas has 3. Did they get the number right? And is there anybody else that you would stand on a table for with regards to being first team all Big 12 this season?
No, by the way, go out and buy Phil Steele's magazine, by the way. No. I think in this one, when you talk, if you're usually the first teamers, you definitely they got it right? Bijan Robinson, I mean, that goes without saying. He's got Heisman odds, potential first round pick. So we know he's solid. Xavier Worthy as a first teamer makes all the sense in the world. And as far as what he accomplished last year, what he can accomplish this year, makes all the sense in the world. DeMarvion Overshown at the linebacker position, I'm fine with. I think, even DeMarvion would tell you he probably wished he had a little bit of a better season. But when you're talking about preseason, reputation, upside, all those kind of things, DeMarvion Overshown is solid. So if you tell me this year that's where we're starting from a first-team perspective, I've got no problem.
Do you think that's what it's going to look like next week when, the official preseason all Big 12 team comes out? Are we confident that Overshown sneaks in? Is there anybody else that could sneak in?
I don't think there will be anybody else that sneaks in. I think Bijan and Xavier are your solid ones. I'll be interested from a media perspective, how many people vote for DeMarvion. I get the sense he probably will be on that list, preseason Big 12 list. I wouldn't be shocked. But because you just never know how these vote things are going to go, and who's voting from how many riders from a specific city have votes. So, but I would say that's got to be pretty consistent.
All right. So the second team list, Phil Steele, by the way, comes out with a first, second, third, and fourth team all Big 12.
That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, and sometimes when you do that many teams, it comes down to who you left off more so than who you put on it. We'll get to that in a second. That's a little bit of a tease. If we look at the second team, there's 2 guys that make the list. Defensive tackle Moro Ajomo and cornerback/punt returner Deshaun Jameson. I say cornerback/punt returner because Jameson made the second team at both positions. Okay. Your instant reaction to those 2 guys being listed?
I'll start with Deshaun. I think you and I were huge fans, and still are, of Deshaun Jameson. I think you and I still believe Deshaun's, NFL future probably is at that special teams position more so than anything else. I think, and that's, by the way, Ketch, that's not a knock. mean, we've seen guys throughout the years be fantastic return people and make a living off of doing that. So that's not a knock by saying he'll be a specialist. So that's a good thing. When it comes to Morrow, that one's interesting. Ketch, this is a defensive line that struggled last year. I think Morrow would tell you if Morrow was allowed to do interviews, Ketch.
As you said that, it started like that clicked into my head. I was like, oh yeah.
Yeah. If he was allowed to do interviews, he would tell you, and it'll be interesting to see it'll be interesting, Ketch. First of all, before I get into Morrow, does Morrow Ajomo, does Sarkisian take him to Big 12 Media Days next week?
No.
Not at all, right? He's shut down, right?
I mean, if you're taking offense and defense, I think you have to take Overshown.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, he'll put on a show.
Yeah.
Probably taking Bijan because they didn't do that a year ago, and it feels like it should be Bijan's time to shine for a potential Heisman campaign, all of that stuff. Those two would be my guess.
Okay. So, just real quick. If I set the over-under on the middle of October, do the media speak to Morrow Ajomo before the middle of October or after? I'll take Texas OU. Do we speak to him before Texas OU or after Texas OU if I set the line?
I'm going to say before.
Okay.
But it won't be right away. And it may be that, look, if he's the second best player on the Texas defense, then there will be requests for Morrow Ajomo. And, part of that is, although Morrow Ajomo is an older player, I don't think anybody's ever said, oh, well, that guy's one of the best players on the team.
Mm-hmm.
So he's one of the I think he's one of the smartest guys on the team. He's a guy that I would listen to talk about things, but I don't know that I've ever thought to myself, they've got to bring Morrow Ajomo out to the media because you got to hear from the best players. But who knows? Maybe I just don't think of Morrow Ajomo in that light. And I'm curious to see if he gets this kind of run from the Big 12 media writers. There's nobody from the Texas defensive line from a year ago that deserves to be on an all Big 12 team coming into this season. If I was going to put somebody there, I'd probably put Byron Murphy, the second-year guy who on a per-snap basis was the best defensive lineman that Texas had a year ago. But that's a very wonky insiders type of number. I don't know that writers in Kansas are checking out Alex's deep digs.
Yeah.
Get the analytics of it all. They're looking at very baseline stats. I mean, Morrow Ajomo made second team all Big 12 this year in the preseason, and he made 29 tackles, had 3 tackles for loss and 3 quarterback hits, no sacks, no created turnovers. Maybe that speaks to what returns in the Big 12 this year at that position. I'm not surprised by Deshaun Jameson. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm hating on Morrow Ajomo because, right on for him. Cool. There are worse things in life than to be projected to be a second-team all-conference player going into your senior year. I was a little surprised to see that name that high.
Yeah, I would say a little bit. If you told me third team, I'd probably say that. And, Morrow's smart enough when he sees this video, what he's going to do is save it and replay it and use that as fuel and motivation from what I can tell about him because he's that smart and articulate. So the hard part, I think just the hard part more so is just that defense struggled so much last season. It's just hard to stand on the table for anyone on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's the hard part.
It's even hard to stand on the table for Overshown, and we love that guy, but nobody on the defensive side of the ball last year had, I think, even a good year, let alone a great. There may have been a couple of guys that had good years. I'll give you one of them. On the third team, two more players make the All Big 12 third. If you go by, look, Phil Steele, I think, had Texas finish 4th or 5th in the Big 12 in his preseason predictions. His All Big 12 teams kind of indicate this. Texas is going to get to like its 6th player on the third team. Baylor had 6 by itself on the first team. So, you know, Texas has got some guys on this list. They're kind of spread out. He's got third team wide receiver Isaiah Nayor and third team safety Anthony Cook. I'll tell you what my initial thought of that is, Anwar. He might have been better off flipping Nayor and Cook to the second team, and putting Ojomo and Jameson on the third team. Like, I think he might have just flipped those guys, and it might have looked a little bit more realistic for me, because Nayor is a guy that has a chance to put up really big numbers. He did a year ago at Wyoming. This is a guy who's been an all-conference level player. And Anthony Cook was the best piece of that secondary a year ago, so much so they've moved him from the spot where he had played really well at that nickel position, now have him at safety, and really didn't aggressively go after safeties in the portal because they feel really good about what Anthony Cook in his senior year can give them. Like I said, I might bump those guys up a spot and take the other two guys and just drop them down a level.
Yeah, because Ketch, when you look at what he has, Phil has on his second team, Ketch, you know, two guys that stand. Like, I have zero issues with Marvin Mims being on the second team, right? But he's also has Brendan Presley from Oklahoma State. That's 50 receptions for 619 yards and 5 TDs. Okay, and then the Bryce Ford Wheaton from West Virginia, 42 receptions, 575 and 3 TDs. Nothing to me screams, wow, you've got to. Those guys are that much better than Isaiah Nayor. I would contend that Isaiah Nayor, being one of the best receivers in his conference, and being one of the most sought after guys that was in the transfer portal, I would definitely say that Isaiah Nayor is more of a second teamer than me, because everything, Catch, as a when people vote on stuff and everything, people talk about like Pro Football Hall of Fame. This is what I would always, do for years, right, as a Pro Football Hall of Fame voter. And people would say, well, this person should have gotten in and this person should have gotten in. My response was always, okay, well, who do you take off? Yeah. Like, if you tell me this person got snubbed, then you got to tell me who deserves to come off the list. And so for me, the answer is you take off one of those receivers and put Isaiah Nayor there.
I think you're 100% right. When you look at the receiving position in the Big 12, Xavier Worthy, Quentin Johnston, I'll say Xavier Hutchinson from Iowa State, and then Marvin Mims. If you're going to put those 4 guys ahead of Isaiah Nayor, I get it. Those guys have been really successful. They've done it in this conference.
Yeah,
I'm a little surprised that Marvin Mims only made second team. That's just me.
I like Marvin. I think he's really good.
I do too. I think that's going to be a guy that plays on Sunday for a long time.
Yes.
The other 2 guys don't pass the eyeball smell test when compared specifically to Isaiah Nayor and what he did last year in a run-based offense where he was basically the only receiving threat. It kind of makes me think that it might be disappointing at the end of the season if Isaiah Nayor isn't at that kind of a level. I mean, if we're talking about goals for that guy, that dude ain't trying to make 4th team all Big 12 or 3rd team. No. He will be very disappointed with himself if his number is only getting that. So it's something to keep an eye on. Okay. Now we've got 4th team players. And the 4th team list is all kinds of interesting for a variety of different reasons. 3 players made 4th team all Big 12. Which leads you to believe when the All Big 12 team comes out next week, these dudes ain't going to be on it. Offensive tackle Christian Jones. So they picked, in their mind, the best Texas offensive lineman is Christian Jones.
Okay.
Keandre Coburn, who a year ago we would have been screaming that this was too low for him on the list. And then Diamante, Tucker, Dorsey, the transfer. Those three guys all make fourth team all Big 12. Let me ask you the following questions about all three. Is Christian Jones definitely going to start for Texas?
That's a great question because I don't think we can definitively say that he is going to start. He's in a battle. He's got to emerge from training camp, as a guy that Kyle Flood, Steve Sarkisian, like they believe in, that they believe he'll play better than he did last year. This would be one of those. I wish Alex was here to give us his geeked out stats because he's given them before. And offensive line struggled a lot last year. So the only thing is, Ketch, when you're getting, you and I've done lists like this before. It's kind of like at fourth team is almost like doing honorable mention.
No, that's fair. Yeah.
So like at that point, like you're just this is almost like honorable mention at this point.
Well, so the question that I was going to ask then to follow that up, is there anybody on that offensive line that you would have replaced Jones with and said, yeah, I put this guy in the top 20 offensive linemen in the Big 12? I've got one.
Hey, who do you have?
I might be tricky and put Kelvin Banks in there. I mean, if I'm going to be wrong, I'd rather be wrong about somebody that I think is going to be great versus just some dude who's, you're just filling out a roster spot. So I don't get the sense that Phil still leans into youth and newcomers as much as I might, but yeah, I might go complete off the grid and take Kelvin Banks, who may very well be your starter at left tackle, which would make him the most valuable player on the Texas offensive line by sheer definition. Bit of a wild card, but I might do that over Christian Jones, who I don't know, because 6 weeks into the season, I feel pretty certain that Kelvin Banks is going to be a starter. I don't know that I feel that way about Christian Jones. I just don't know.
It's a tough catch. It's a tough one because we know he's a star. We know he's in a battle ahead, right? And because we know that, it's really hard just to kind of say, like, to co-sign on it. I'm trying to think, Catch, is there anybody else that we're potentially missing from an offensive line? There's probably someone that will put it in the comments and have their person.
I mean, Junior Angilau is probably a guy that would get some run. And
that's the guy I was thinking of, baby. Junior.
Like, I would put Junior in there ahead of Christian Jones.
Yeah, if we're talking fourth team, then I would say Junior Angilau, especially the years of service that he's put in on the offensive line. What is this, his fourth season, Catch? Will he be a senior this year? And let me see, how many games did Junior start in? Let me look this up real quick.
Oh God, he started a lot of football games.
Yeah. So let me go Junior bio. Going to be a fifth-year offensive lineman, Catch, and Texas with the ad blocker. He started in 34 games, Catch.
But he's going to be, when he's done, he's going to be a guy that started, like, if he stays healthy, 45-plus games in his career. That is not a small number. I think back to when he was a recruit on War and how if you wouldn't have been able to convince the Texas coaching staff at the time that Junior Angilau would never have quite hit the light switch, considering how all in they were with him during his recruitment and how much importance that he carried as a prospect, that it, back then impacted personnel decisions with the coaching staff because they had to have Junior Angilau.
I mean, that was a big win, to be able to get Junior. It was a huge win to bring him here. remember, Catch, all the offseason, people, is he going to serve a mission trip? Is he not going to serve a mission trip? Because they wanted him here that badly, and really kind of had to talk to them about, hey, pushing that off to the side. So yeah, I would say Junior. Junior's a guy that if you're going to go fourth team, he could probably. I think that's a guy I would stand on the table and say, yeah, he was a valuable commodity. He started in a bunch of games, started in all 12 games last year.
He's the best lineman on the team.
Yes.
Whatever that means, that's who he is. All right, what about Diamante Tucker Dorsey as a fourth team linebacker? Kind of a shoulder shrug for me.
Yeah.
It might be right. It might be wrong. I noticed that who isn't there is Jalen Ford, who's expected to be a starter, that they leaned into the guy that they have to know less about. I thought was a little bit interesting. But if Tucker Dorsey ends up being fourth team All-Big 12 this year, which, like you said, that makes him honorable mention in a real world, that's a pretty good pickup for them then if they end up going from nothing other than overshown to having two guys worthy of singing a little bit of praise to. I don't know. I really still don't know what to think of Tucker Dorsey as a prospect.
Yeah, I mean, none of us know at this point because we haven't seen him do it on the big stage. And so because we hadn't seen him do it, I mean, it's kind of like catch Devin Richardson, where he was a standout where he was before, and then he got to Texas, and we really just never heard from him again. So it's one of those, like, we've got to be able to see, does that translate when you get here? And that's where, like, for me, having Tucker Dorsey on there is fine, but there's still a lot to be proven. I would think there's no way Diamante Tucker Dorsey sees that and is like, I've made it. Like, there's still room for improvement as far as that is concerned. But
all right, let's talk
about. There's another guy I feel like was left off though. Catch.
Who?
I mean, from a tight end perspective.
Well, hold on. I'm getting to that.
Okay.
Because I was going to say, now that we've gone through the team, I wanted to briefly talk about guys that just didn't show up at all that might have warranted that kind of discussion. I'm going to get to that guy. There's actually two of them at that tight end position. But Quinn Ewers doesn't make first, second, third, or fourth team quarterback for Phil Steele. Dylan Gabriel of Oklahoma was first team. Spencer Sanders of Oklahoma State was second team. JT Daniels of West Virginia, third team. And Adrian Martinez of Kansas State, fourth team. If you told me that 3 out of the 4 players on Phil Steele's all Big 12 quarterbacks were going to be incoming transfers, and the biggest transfer of all the transfers isn't named, I don't get it. I don't get how Quinn Ewers isn't there somewhere.
Somewhere in first 1 through 4, right? You can't put him on first or second. I get that. But this is one of those, like, yeah, at some point, he's got to be on the team. He's got to be at the very least, because Ketch, if he's right, that what does it mean if Quinn Ewers is not in the top 4?
6 and 6.
Yeah. That's a bad moon rising.
I'm stunned by it.
Correct.
I'm stunned by it because the implication, I think, is incredibly significant.
Yeah. And so for me, no, I think Quinn Ewers is a guy. You take a flyer on him, and you tell Adrian Martinez, like, that was cool what you did at Nebraska, but clearly wasn't enough. I mean, it wasn't enough. They went after Casey Thompson. Like, they wanted somebody else because they just thought it was like, okay, and nothing special. Quinn Ewers, Catch, was the number 1 quarterback, number 1 person come out of high school. So it's really interesting, Catch.
A generational talent.
Correct. It is so what's become so fascinating in the Quinn Ewers story? It's like the Roy Jones Jr. y'all must have forgot. it's so many people. It's almost like that thing happened 5 years ago or 6 years ago. And it's weird to think that Quinn Ewers, in the minds of a lot of people, has a lot to prove, where you say to yourself, really? Does he have that much to prove? Like, does Quinn Ewers have to prove he's better than Adrian Martinez or JT Daniels? Is that the conversation?
I like to play it like this. If Quinn Ewers was offered straight up in a trade to any of the head coaches at any of those schools, is the Kansas State head coach keeping Adrian Martinez and letting Quinn Ewers go to someone else? Is West Virginia saying, no, we want JT Daniels on his third team over the goal? No, these guys they'd like trade fingers and body parts to be able to have Quinn Ewers as their quarterback and to see what they could do with the kind of generational quarterback that they'll almost certainly never coach in their lives. It makes me wonder with the all Big 12 list. Look, clearly, if you go by what Phil Steele just said, don't look for Quinn Ewers next week when the all Big 12 team comes out. I have been wondering because the guy's got decent Heisman odds. He's plus 2,000 to win the Heisman, which is just a little bit below Bijan Robinson at plus 1,800. So Vegas looks at Quinn Ewers and has a lot of respect for his ability. I don't know that college football writers do. All season long, I will have this little conversation filed away in the back of my brain in terms of who, because if Phil Steele's right, we'll do a video during the season where we'll bow down to Phil Steele and say, he saw this, Quinn Ewers thing coming a mile away. Look how smart he was. But it just feels off. And then on where you mentioned the tight end position, no Jaleel Billingsley, who Mel Kiper thinks is the second best tight end prospect in the draft, and no Jatavian Sanders, who's one of the few five-star prospects in the entire conference, let alone as a tight end within the conference. Again, a little bit of a shoulder shrug for me. They put Baylor Cupp, the Texas A&M transfer, who's now at Texas Tech. They put him at second team. He's barely played in 3 years because of his injuries. I'm not sure what they see in the guys that they picked that you wouldn't go incoming transfer who's played a lot for Alabama or five-star prospect entering his second year who during the spring flashed some pretty freaky stuff.
Ketch. So I looked as you're talking. So the other guys that were on the list ahead of him, Mike O'Laughlin.
Yes.
Excuse me. Ketch. Looks like he's been on campus for 4 seasons. He has in 4 years, Ketch. You ready? 32 receptions, 226 yards, and 1 touchdown. In 4 total years on campus, that's what he has.
Billingsley's done that in a season at Alabama. Alabama.
Yes. Braden Willis, who's on the 4th team, last season, Ketch, had 15 from OU, 15 receptions, 177 yards, and 2 TDs.
Look, I think I've proven, I hope, that I'm not just some homer who just comes on and says the company line all the time. They got that wrong. I mean, look, I'll give them some benefit of the doubt at quarterback. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that could happen, that Texas doesn't have one of the 4 best tight ends in the conference when you might make a case they've got the best 2. I don't know. If this was they'd be like, it feels like a wrong team favored kind of moment. Now, the rest of this, I think we can go through fairly quickly. There are no other, we talked about the offensive line.
Yeah.
Not really standing, you might stand on a table for Junior Engelau to be somewhere in like the top 20 best offensive linemen in the Big 12. But would you break your neck to do so? No.
Nah.
It'd be a small table.
Okay.
Like, do I really have to climb on the dining room table? What if I fell? On the defensive line, I probably would stand on a mini table for Murphy, who we've already mentioned, who I think you can't tell me that guy's the 9th best defensive tackle in the Big 12. There aren't that many players better than him. There's a part of me that wants to take a flyer on Alfred Collins, even though he hasn't earned it yet.
Alfred Collins it's like when we were drawing up fan clubs, and it was the Alfred Collins fan club, and then we have the Jatavian Sanders fan club, and I feel like every fan club member is just waiting for that justification of their membership dues, and I'm still going to hold out belief that at some point it flips for Alfred, and from start to finish, he's able to piece it together. I don't know what – I mean, I've heard, you hear little things as far as what the issues and challenges are, but if he's a guy that if he does piece it together, I mean, if he can live up to the flashes that we saw from him as a freshman, he ends up being a really special player, that's on that list. We just have to see it.
When I see Maro Ajomo and Keandre Coburn on the list, that just makes me think, oh, well, we can find some room for Alfred Collins. If they looked at all the returning stats and they were like, oh, we'll put those guys there, I personally would find a way to get Alfred Collins somewhere on that list, just because if the light switch goes on, you're going to look stupid for not being aware that, oh, yeah, that Alfred Collins guy exists in general. There's nobody at linebacker, no offense to Jalen Ford, that I would probably stand on a table for yet. Is there anybody in the secondary? Cook and Jameson are already on it.
Yeah. The safeties are all kind of guys that have been moved over, Ketch. So there's nobody else that I can say for sure that, hey, this is the guy. I mean, they're really when we start looking at the interceptions that they had last season, Ketch, and Texas only had 6. The only person in that secondary who had an interception was Deshaun Jameson, and that was 1.
Yeah.
That was it. So it is not like we're looking at it and saying, okay, you can't judge it on the interception thing because this is a lockdown corner. No one's throwing it to their side of the football. That's not what happened. So if you only had one guy with 1 interception, it's kind of hard to stand on the table for anybody else.
I might go Jahdae Barron just because the last 6 weeks of the season last year, he started to emerge as maybe the best corner that the Longhorns had. And I kind of think I think Barron is safer in his spot as a starter than Jameson is as a starter. I'm not saying Jameson would lose his job, but I think there was some frustration with Jameson last year. And if he plays like that again this year and they've got young players, I think it's more likely that Jameson comes off the field instead of Barron. But it's a pretty tedious inner Texas program conversation. I think for the most part, they've named the guys that probably need to be named.
What about Jaron Thompson?
No, no way.
Okay.
Not for me.
Okay.
The last thing I was going to say, and then I'll let you have the final word on any ribbon and bow you want to put on the conversation. I mentioned Baylor had the most first-team players, 6. Oklahoma was second with 4. Oklahoma State leads all teams with first and second-team players combined with 9. Whereas Texas had 5. Oklahoma State has 9. And Baylor has as many first-teamers as Texas has first and second-teamers. I think it paints a picture, Steele has Texas fourth in the Big 12 behind Oklahoma, Baylor, and Oklahoma State. I think that's going to be a theme in the preseason. I think next week when the all Big 12 media poll stuff comes out, I think those three teams are going to be given benefits of the doubt. And then I think Texas is not going to get very much benefit of the doubt at all and is likely listed at fourth, probably fourth, although Kansas State is turning into a sleeper team in college football this year. Lots of returning starters. They did add Adrian Martinez, who Phil still likes more than Quinn Ewers. They do have, obviously, Deuce Vaughn at running back. Wouldn't surprise me if we end up seeing point totals when the voting comes out and that Texas and Kansas State are kind of neck and neck for fourth and fifth in the preseason poll. That's my prediction.
Ketch, I got a question for you as relates to that. Is when the preseason's top 25s come out, is Texas ranked in the top 25?
Yeah, they'll be 20 through 25. They almost always are. I mean, as many bad teams as Texas has had over the years, ironically, they usually start the season somewhere ranked.
Is that a good thing? If you're Sarkisian, do you want it? If you're Sarkisian, do you want that? Or do you want some fuel for the fire?
I think you do want it. You know, I think one of the things that they're still trying to establish is confidence. So there's a conversation that whether it's earned or not, that if they're 21st in the country, he can sit down with them and say, we can do something this year. And this is our building block point. This is who people think we are. This is where we want to go. I do think it works perfectly fine if they're not. And then he gets to paint the underdog card. Mm-hmm. Problem is they're going to use that underdog card against Alabama. And you won't, once that game's over with, I don't know if you want to play that card anymore. You know, like it doesn't sound fun. Anyway, I'm all good. I'm out of thoughts.
All right, last thing I'll say is, Ketch, you and I do list all the time. And the one thing, you know, so people understand is that when media people put together lists, they expect it to be analyzed, dissected, and people to argue about it. That's to be expected. So look, you know, I just want to say to anyone from the Phil Steele magazine that stayed here to the end of the video, hey, we know Ketch and I know it's a tough job. And as many things as you get right, people are going to pick apart the things that you get wrong. So it's not, you know, this is what we do. This is what we're talking about. A good job as with Phil Steele magazine, as they always do. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, I think Phil Steele's overrated.
Oh, jeez. I was trying.
Hey, you gave them the. I appreciate them giving us content today. Thank you. I'm not gonna lie. I have some questions for myself and Anwar Richardson. Do us a solid. Like the channel, subscribe to the channel. I will be going live tonight, Tuesday, 7:00. It'll be OB at night. Who knows what the hell we'll do? It'll be crazy. We'll have fun. I'll answer your questions. We'll talk recruiting. Until then, you guys be good to each other. Later.